All right. Hello, everyone. Happy to see so many faces in this room. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. And today we're going to talk about the automated city shuttles. And at the end of this presentation, I hope you all will have your own opinion whether it's a blessing or a cybersecurity nightmare. So a little bit about myself. My name is Anastasija Collen, sorry. I'm a senior researcher and lecturer at the University of Geneva, where I'm co-directing Information Security Lab. I come from the software development and security engineering background because I used to work in the industry before I switched back to academic world. I'm also a mother and a wife of 2, or we can say 3 boys, if we count all of them in the house. I discovered my passion for cybersecurity quite early in my career, and I have to admit I'm struggling a lot between finding the right balance between the home, family life, and pursuing your passion for doing something that you really like a lot. I also like to travel, and through moving the countries, I had the experience to live in 4 countries overall. I continuously pursue my passion and my strong belief that any person in Earth deserves to have a privacy that they wish to have. So that's kind of the sideline of my research that I always try to pursue. Just a little bit disclaimer. This talk, in a way, is a tribute to my ex-Irish colleagues, with whom it became a tradition. For decades we go to Insomnihack together, and at least once a year we meet at this event. And I just couldn't not to say thanks to them, to Julien, Gregory, Francois, Florent as well. Even if he's not here, he's far away in Japan. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting. And of course, this talk is only possible because of my amazing lab mates from University of Geneva. It's only with your help that this talk is possible. Okay, so let's talk about automated city shuttle. Can you please raise your hand, those of you who think you know what is automated city shuttle? Really nobody? All right. Next question then. Did any of you had an opportunity to ride in one of these vehicles? 1, 2. So you did ride, you think you ride in them, but you have no idea whether it's truly automated city shuttle or not, right? Okay. Did any of you get the opportunity to try to hack into one of them? Obviously not. All right. So let's get the terminology straight. What we are going to talk about, the automated city shuttles, those are not the autonomous vehicles. This is a technology that does not exist yet. We are dreaming about it. One day we will be there, but not today. You may be more familiar with this notion of the robotaxis. One of the most famous examples is the Cruise in America. But it's a wrong business model. It's small cars, small passenger cars, where you can fit maximum 5 people inside. It's not suitable for the public transportation as such. And probably the closest notion that comes to the automated city shuttles, it's the connected automated vehicle. So it's in fact the domain from which the automated city shuttles raised. So what are those specific attributes of the automated city shuttle? Well, obviously it implies that they can do some kind of automated driving. They are all powered by electricity. They can operate on the fixed or predefined, how we call it sometimes, or on-demand routing. They go with very slow speeds, maximum up to 30 kilometers per hour. Today, we are targeting faster speeds in the future. They can fit up to 16 passengers inside, and that's what makes it very interesting for the public transportation operators and for the dense city environments. They go slow, they can fit relatively big number of people inside them. That's why we're looking into it. In the driving automation, we are distinguishing 6 different levels of the automation. So the autonomous car, the technology that does not exist yet, that's a level 5 vehicle. It's full automation. It can drive in any kind of conditions. It's the vehicle itself which is responsible for the driving. And you, as a passenger, can do whatever you want in this vehicle. You can read the book. You can play cards. You can have a drink, coffee, beer, wine, whatever you want. Then when we talk about level 4, these vehicles are equipped with high automation. What does it mean? There are no wheels, no pedals. You don't really need any driver there because it's still the vehicle that is responsible for driving. However, with the legislations, for example, we are required to have a safety operator. That's what is quite a common trend at the moment in Europe, at least. But these vehicles cannot operate all the time. They operate only in limited conditions. So once they arrive in the situations they don't know how to handle, they just stop. So this is a typical representative of the automated city shuttle. That's how they operate. Then when we move downwards, we have level 3 with conditional automation. It's important to note this level because it's where the transition of the responsibility happens from the human being to the vehicle. It means, think about it like a traffic jam chauffeur. So when it's a heavy traffic, you stay in the car, you can release your hands from the wheel, feet from the pedal. You can look around while it's going slowly in this traffic jam. But as soon as the conditions are changing, the vehicle is falling back to the human being who needs to keep driving this vehicle. And then, of course, level 2, partial automation, you have some automation features like lane centering, adaptive cruise control. With level 1, we have assisted driving, where we have only one feature available to us to a time, so we can either just release, most frequently we just release the feet from the pedal. And then level 0, no automation whatsoever. You still get to have ABS or blind spot detection, but this is not automation features. So how does these automated vehicles are operating? For that, they have plethora of different sensors deployed in them. So let's go a little bit through them. So the first one is the radar, standing for the radio detection and ranging. So we have two types of them. What is depicted in yellow-orangish color, it's a long-range radar, which is used for the adaptive cruise control and emergency braking because it can see quite far away, so it can control at which point it needs to brake. And then we have the mid- and short-range radars, which are mostly used for the blind spot monitoring and object detection, whatever is happening around the vehicle, and sometimes in the parking assistance. Then we go into the LiDAR. So here we have also, again, two types. The first one is a 3D LiDAR, which is providing you an 3D environment around the vehicle. So that's depicted in the green big circle. It's also used for collision avoidance, for obstacle detection. And then usually these vehicles come with many 2D LiDARs, the gray triangles, which are mostly used for the object detection and the path planning in the short vision of the vehicle. Then we have cameras, also two types of them. The first one, the classical one, the RGB camera. So it helps to detect traffic signs, traffic lights, the lanes on the road. It also helps you to keep the car within the lane, helps you to recognize some object and do the path planning when you also in the short range. And then we have the infrared cameras, and those are mostly used for the low visibility conditions. So nighttime, fog, rain. The same thing, it's used for the emergency braking and also for the pedestrian detection, specifically so anything that is in the close proximity with the vehicle. Then we go to the ultrasonic devices. Well, this is really close-range obstacle detection, mostly used for parking assistance, sometimes for the automated door opening and closing for the safety. And the last, you probably all heard the term GNSS, the Global Navigation Satellite Systems. So these are helping through the satellites and also through the 3G, 4G, 5G, whatever your vehicle happen to be equipped with, to help to position and localize where the vehicle currently is, to do the route planning. And in case if you have, in the future, we will have the fleets of these vehicles, also to track this whole fleet of the vehicles and see which vehicle needs to be sent where depending on the current demand. All right. In addition to the sensors that we briefly discussed, we also have very wide communication ecosystem. So we have some onboard ports like OBD2, USB, infotainment systems. We have in-vehicle communication like CAN, lane flex tray. I'm not going to go into the details in this talk for the sake of the brevity. What is important to memorize here is that we have 3 types of vehicle connections that we will have on a big scale in the future, but we are not fully there yet today. We have vehicle to vehicle, so the 2 vehicles can communicate with each other. So for sure, for automation level 5, that's a must-have. V2I, it's already available in these vehicles. The problem is with the infrastructure, because changing infrastructure on the roads is not cheap, and it's a very slow process. So we do have the vehicle technology already compatible with that, but not the other way around. And then we have this futuristic notion of vehicle to everything, meaning you can even communicate with pedestrians who are just thinking to approach the street at specific moments so that the traffic light can adapt accordingly and communicate it with the vehicle. So where we can see all these automated city shuttles. This is a snapshot of European map of currently active projects. And with the blue dots, you can see all those trials that are operating on the public roads. So plenty of them. If we zoom in and look at Switzerland, we also see many of them. There is a cluster in Geneva and in the Zurich area. So actually in Geneva, we have one of the biggest European testing sites for quite some years now. But I think it's going to be surpassed probably by Zurich in this year because they have just recently announced quite a big pilot project. There are also many manufacturers which are involved in creation of these vehicles. The most famous American ones, for example, are Waymo and Cruise. You probably heard the names. We also have the Asian ones like WeRide, and I think this one is really gaining the momentum because recently they opened, they created the agreement with the Renault group, so they are widely going to be deployed in Europe. I don't know if you follow a little bit the news. They're currently running trials in Barcelona, also in Valence in France, and we're going to have them in Zurich and also in Geneva. And then we have European actors like Navia, the French manufacturer. We also have Loxo, which is Swiss manufacturer, and also Oftech from Estonia, just to name a few. So why we will see more of it? The main reason is because we have congested cities. And many urban planners and policies and governments, they are searching for effective mobility optimization techniques. And these vehicles fit perfectly with their agenda. So we can use them for the logistics and passengers transportation. It's good in the long term, so the sustainability. And as I said, it's heavily backed by the authorities because they see big interest in it. So let's now talk about the threats, now that you are all experts in how the automated vehicles are operated. For this talk, I actually wanted to make a timeline of publicly known incidents, data breaches, vulnerabilities that are applicable specifically for automated city shuttles, for this very small niche of the technology that we are working with. And I failed to do so, but not because I'm a lazy person, not because I didn't have enough time to do it in preparation for this talk, but simply because there is no public knowledge. This technology is relatively new, even if we started to work with it already from 2016. But the manufacturers are keeping it so much behind the curtains, obscuring this whole thing, that nothing gets leaked out into the public. Well, in our lab, we approached it a little bit differently, obviously. We looked at these technologies, the sensors that I described before, and we tried to understand what is the threat landscape applicable for them. And as you can guess, because most of them are wireless and radio-based, the spoofing and the jamming are the biggest threats that are applicable in this context. Another best match that I managed to find in preparation for this talk is the researchers from the Taltech in Estonia who created a replica of Estonian vehicle. They were heavily inspired, obviously, with the MIT Ducky Town to create this cyber-physical system of representative of the automated vehicles. They created 8 security testing scenarios where they were trying to dose the communication channels. They tried to spoof different sensors. They have very cool videos on YouTube if you want to search and take a look at them after. But again, it's not a real vehicle, even if they try to replicate to the maximum what is happening in this vehicle, and it's still, I admit, better than just doing it in the simulation environment, still, it's not a real vehicle. So in our lab, we do formal modeling of risk and threats. And we thought with all the collaborations that we have with the manufacturers while we're working with these vehicles, it would be super cool to do the validation of our formal risk assessment with pen testing, right? So we had to limit a little bit the scope. It's quite a small lab. We are just 6 people overall. We have big plans, but we cannot do everything that we dream of. And we selected just a couple of scenarios which were most feasible, but with the most devastating potential impacts. And we put some criteria how to execute these tests. We wanted to keep to the cost of the execution and the hardware acquiring as low as possible so that it would be very easy to get this hardware as well. We wanted to not to have any interaction with the vehicle itself, because it's also then very difficult to get the permission from the manufacturer to do anything, because they are afraid that this vehicle will be broken and then no longer operational. We wanted to stay out of sight, and it deploys the techniques that any kind of beginner would try to do. So we selected the software-defined Blade RF hardware. Okay, perfect. So what did we do? Our first idea was to impersonate the 3G connection, so create the raw BTS. We used a couple of software for that, so the 8BTS that helps you to simulate the base station. We also use the cell mapper to identify what are the closest base stations so that we can position ourselves in the fair position to compete with that. And of course, we use a Wireshark afterwards, now that the vehicle was connected to our fake base station, to analyze the traffic. Well, it was not that interesting from the perspective of the vehicle operation, because we did not manage to interfere anyhow with the operation of the vehicle. We were, however, positively surprised that all traffic was encrypted, because we were expecting really much worse situation than that. Despite the fact that the data is constantly streamed to the manufacturer, even if manufacturer is located outside of Switzerland, at least it's encrypted, so not that bad. The next idea was to work a little bit with GNSS sensors. So I will give you just a little bit of a context. So GNSS signal is contained 3 types of information. The first one is the measurement of the signal. So it's position, speed, timing. Then there is something that is called ephemeris, which is a precise position of one single satellite with a maximum life duration of 4 hours. And then we have the almanac, less precise positioning of all the satellites involved in this specific geolocalization. So our idea was to use the fact that there is no authentication of the GNSS signal. So if we will broadcast the false signals to the GPS, the GNSS receiver of the vehicle, and we will be very close to it, probably we will perturb its operation somehow. For that, we use the simulation of the GPS with a little bit of firmware changes on the blade. And we use the published ephemeris data from the NASA to make it as more realistic as possible. However, we did not manage, again, to perturb the navigation of the vehicle while we were executing this attack. The vehicle did complain about not receiving correct GNSS data, obviously. But what was reassuring for us that it's not its primarily source of information. Obviously, it backs up this data through the 3G, 4G base tower connection, and also direct sensors application when it's navigating. So it's not relying only on the satellite data. Obviously, GNSS jamming, that is a must too. It's simple. We want to create a noise on the desired frequency, as you know, or maybe you don't know. Normally, the jamming devices are forbidden, so we retrofitted BladeRX for that. And with a bit of Python scripting, we managed to do it. So once we executed the attack, once we jammed the GNSS signal, the vehicle was forced to halt. And it was a bit contradictory with the previous one, right? Because we tried to spoof, it didn't really work, so maybe there was something still that was not correctly spoofed. But here, now that we completely jammed it, the vehicle just halted. Good. Or not. These vehicles, as you can imagine, they have direct impact on the physical security. So just stopping at the road, it's okay. There was no harm done. But nevertheless, because they are having such a physical aspect towards human lives, we need to regulate it. So there's a plethora of different organizations who are working towards various aspects of the compliance. So we can look at the standards, recommendations, the automotive associations, and also the certifications and whatever. There are so many working bodies in that. When we did the in-depth review of specifically standardization efforts, so all the currently ongoing work groups and work groups in progress and so on, we observed that the general focus is always on the level 3 vehicles. And if you remember from the beginning, I was mentioning that level 3, it's very crucial level. It's when we give the responsibility from the human to a vehicle. So you cannot apply the same cybersecurity measures when the vehicle is operated by the human being or fully automated. So there should be some distinguishment. And I would like to add a little bit of manufacturers' optics on that. Some manufacturers are better than the others in terms of the openness, but we also observed certain manufacturers who have not very nice aptitude, let's say it more politely, in the sense when new regulation is released, and for example this summer the regulation on the cyber resilience supposed to come into the place, enforcing the manufacturers really to put in place the cybersecurity monitoring systems. Their idea was to hire a team of lawyers and to find a loophole in this regulation under the pretext that it's very novel, this technology. It does not apply to us. We are not like really there yet. We are not invading massively the roads. Instead of actually putting the right amount of money by creating a very good cybersecurity team with the same pretext that legally now we need to do it. Yeah, that's a bit sad. But there's hope. In Switzerland also we have a new ordinance that came into the place just this 1st of March, which is allowing quite few new things. For example, now you're allowed to activate your autopilot in the vehicle if it's level 3 pilot. I don't know if any of you are here the owners of the Mercedes or Audi with the level 3 autopilot, because Tesla officially is not qualified as level 3, it's level 2. And then for these driverless vehicles, now we can remove these safety operators that I was mentioning before. It comes with a price, of course. They must be now, according to the ordinance, remotely monitored. What does it mean, actually? It means that now you have to enable 24/7 channel open to this vehicle, that you can navigate it the way you want if you manage to hack this channel somehow. So for me, it was the scariest thing when I saw this in the new legislation. I was like, oh my God, where we are going? On the positive side, together with ordinance, the team from engineers and researchers in the SAM, which is Swiss Automated Mobility Organization, they also worked very hard to prepare the official documentation on the minimum requirements for the authorization of this remote driving functionality. And on the positive side, they developed a huge list of cybersecurity requirements, like there are, I think, at least 200 of them, that they made it part of this legislation. It's like, it's recommended, it doesn't mean it's mandatory, but at least we are moving towards the good direction. And the authorities, at least in Switzerland, they integrated it in this new ordinance. Moving to the final part of this presentation on the privacy, and because I'm so passionate about the privacy as well, when I first saw this vehicle in real, and I had an opportunity to have a ride in it, what puzzled me a lot is that there's so many cameras, so many sensors, and this vehicle is owned and operated by a private entity, where all this data about me is going. And if we think of the future vision, when we will have more of these vehicles navigating all over the places, can you truly opt out and not to be captured by all these cameras that are outside the vehicle and inside the vehicle when you are inside? What is the footage detail of this capturing? Also, it collects the audio, not just the video. So, and I'm not talking about all other data that is collected when you buy the tickets, when they measure how many people went in and went out of the vehicle and who took what kind of path. No, just pure data here. Also in our lab, we did obviously investigation on that, and we found primarily 3 types of the privacy threats. So the first one, the most obvious one, is location tracking, through which you can infer future movements of these vehicles and based on the past locations. And you can do some kind of predetermined theft. Maybe you can do some stalking of some people because, or maybe you can also imply some kind of individual behavior patterns. You can be creative about it. The same applies for the video feed surveillance. It's inside and outside of the vehicle. Also, the fleet manager, who is managing all these vehicles deployed within the same system, they need to coordinate it for missions. But how about where this data is actually going? Do we have clear vision on that? No. And also, the way the manufacturers see these vehicles, and specifically the data that is collected by these vehicles, for them, it's only their data because it's their vehicle. It doesn't matter what they capture. Whatever they capture, it's theirs. So the proportionality and the necessity of this data that they are capturing and what they truly need for fulfilling the functions of the automated driving, nobody's controlling it. Nobody has a mindset that it somehow needs to be controlled. And, you would say, oh, we have a GDPR, right? It should protect us. Or in Switzerland, we have an LLPD, right? But it's not that simple because GDPR has known pitfalls. Well, the first one is about the strengths of the privacy preserving in the first place. If you claim that the data that you collect is anonymized, directly GDPR does not apply to you. And then there is a common misconception that, we can use a pseudo-anonymization, but the reality is that it's not as strong. And to de-anonymize the data set is super easy. And when you know the quantities of the data that is collected by these vehicles, it becomes a trivial task. Also, GDPR recommends to have the data protection impact assessment. But as the same regulation does not define very strongly the process that you need to deploy for doing this assessment, it becomes rather a formality because you can just say, yeah, we do it. We analyze this and that. But there is no way to control to what extent did you do it. And finally, GDPR gives very strong public perception. It creates strong public image that somehow you are protected now. But again, in reality, if you imagine just a little bit 5 years from now on, there are more vehicles, these kind of vehicles on the street. You go out of the street and you are caught on the camera of one of these vehicles. Good luck to you to try to claim to this company your right to be forgotten, your right to be erased from their data set. It just does not work on the individual level. And then also this mindset of big companies that we can pay the fine and pay off whatever we're doing that is wrong, because they can afford to pay these fines. So, yeah, GDPR is good. It's better than having nothing, but still. Also, for these vehicles to be on the road, they need to go through the type approval process. So they need to be somehow validated that they are capable of driving on the roads. And this process is heavily depending, and it's also embedded in the standardization, on the threat analysis and risk assessment. It's great for cybersecurity, but privacy is not really considered in it. It's up to individual person who will perform this TARA to include specific properties on the property, but it's not on privacy, but it's not defined as such. So we have a problem there. And the best way to demonstrate it is in the responsibility of the data propagation and data sharing within this whole ecosystem. Because if we consider that the automated city shuttle, what it needs to operate, we are going from the batteries, the production of the batteries, to the energy infrastructure, to the charging infrastructure. Then we have the mobility as a service per se to optimize better the routes planning and so on. So what happens with this little piece of data that was initially leaked, let's say, by the battery producer, but further propagated to maybe infrastructure or to the charging station? Who will be at the end responsible for this data breach? I'm pretty sure they will point to each other with the fingers to say, no, it was not us, no, it was not us. So it's complicated. It also complicated in the question of the insurance. When there is no driver, whom do you hold responsible for any kind of incidents? The Swiss ordinance actually made it a little more clear now. So with this ordinance that came into force just beginning of this month, it's the vehicle owner who is responsible for creating an insurance, and the vehicle is insured for any kind of incidents, and it's the owner of the vehicle who is responsible for that. So, at least in Switzerland, we made it a bit more clear. And of course, the surveillance. As I mentioned before, if we have projection in future, and we have more and more of these vehicles which are capable of capturing all information all around, are we not moving towards some kind of heavy surveillance mode? Because it's like CCTVs deployed everywhere in the city with these vehicles, right? Just it's not really owned by public authorities. It's really the private companies at the end of the day who are operating it. So we need to work here somehow on the question of the trust. Because I think with everything that I'm saying, maybe you will have some doubts whether we truly want to have this technology being in our cities. And I think there is a way, but we need to work on it. Up to now, we treat these vehicles, at least the researchers who are working with them on the daily basis, as a black box. Because even if we are released some of the information, it's always with non-disclosure agreement. We cannot talk about it in public at all. We are not allowed. Manufacturers are still doing lots of things with this notion of security by obscurity. And we do know that this is not a way to go. Also, physical security. The very first versions of these vehicles, when we saw them, were like, why even bother to try to find a ways to hack them remotely? You just go to this vehicle, you lift up the hood, you plug the cable, you have the root access. No need to do anything sophisticated. I understand it was the first prototypes and the idea was to work on the technology, but wouldn't it be greater if they would incorporate the cybersecurity from the beginning, like right now? That's the mindset. And yeah, we try to create more collaborations through the research projects with the manufacturers to try to kind of ignite this notion of the trust, because more open we will get, more we will trust in it. So for that, we have several trust initiatives like the public safety demonstrators. Obviously, more these pilots will be deployed throughout our cities. More we will know about them, more we will get familiar with them, more we will talk about them. Hopefully, things will also change in the good direction. Also, we are working on open data sharing from these vehicles, also to help to understand better possible problems. So it will create more transparency, and hopefully we can also include the notion of the human factors in these kind of initiatives. Because at the end of the day, we develop this technology for us, for people who live in the cities, for those who want to use it on the daily basis. So it needs somehow a match with our mental models on how we perceive this technology. Right. Let's recap a little bit. So we talked a little bit about the different challenges from the security perspective, from the perspective how the regulations are super slow to catch up with the actual technology state, that there is no explicit distinction between highly automated vehicles and just automated vehicles from the standardization perspective. So there's plenty of privacy-related questions, and in general, tech and the government's alignment is struggling. It's lacking behind, but there is hope. From my side, I see it also like a very opportune time because it's a growing market. Today, we are at the early adopter stage. So we only will see more of these vehicles because it's something that today in Europe, we are realizing a lot that we kind of lost a little bit the sovereignty in the automotive domain in general. So there will be a push for that. And I think this is also a very nice opportune moment for security engineers to get your hands dirty and be involved more in that, because we will see more of these vehicles. We will get more requests on doing the pen testing for these vehicles. And it's a kind of strategical technology. So to go back at the very first question that I have asked about whether these vehicles is a blessing or cybersecurity nightmare, I let each of you to make your own decision at the end of the day, what you think. For me, I see both sides. There are problems and there are ways to solve them, and we can still solve it because we are really at the beginning of it. But what is important is to include different opinions, different backgrounds, whether it's engineers, researchers, politicians, urbanists, and really to have a common discussion how to make it better. Thank you very much. And if you want, okay. Thank you. I even did it faster in the end. Okay. Well, there's more time for questions. And also, if you scan this code, you can get the full deck with a slide with some codes that we used for executing our penetration test, if you're interested, and all the sources that I included.
Do we have any questions?
Thank you very much for the very broad and interesting talk. I would like to have a generic question. If it's out of scope for you, then feel free to ignore it. Whenever I hear about automotive and autonomous automotive, I have the feeling that we are just skipping a step ahead. Why doesn't I ever hear people talk about tracked systems like trams, light trains, or even trolleybuses?
Because they have, from at least my kind of knowledge by talking with public transport operators and manufacturers, the other modes of the transportation, like trams and trucks, they require heavy infrastructure investment, while automated vehicle can operate on any kind of road. So you don't need to build a new infrastructure. I think that's the reason, that's why we are the governments are pushing for this kind of technology. Welcome.
Hello. Nice presentation, ma'am. Ma'am, I just have one question with regards to the first vulnerability, which was, I'm not sure if that is called a vulnerability or a finding, but something with regards to the software-defined radio, which was used to do telco-based attack. The reason why I'm asking you this question was because when I tried to do some sort of a pen test on this particular, on a on a vehicle, sorry. So, I was able to create the simulated environment with the rogue base station. However, we were not able to make the connection with that particular device. Am I being clear?
What exactly is your question? You want me to debug your code?
No. So what I actually observed was it requires some sort of an authentication to make the connection from your software-defined radio to the vehicle's baseband chip. So it's just that is what I wanted to know, ma'am.
Not really. But when we talk about the GNSS, as I said, that there is no notification per se. And if you're talking about the base stations, no, it should work. I'm not sure. Maybe we can discuss a little bit after. I can maybe show you some of the codes that we have, but it should have worked. But it's a bit broad question in that sense for me.
Hi. Thank you so much one more time for the great call. Just a question, okay? Now it's at the beginning. In your opinion, how many times do we have to wait before the hacker can finally take control of the car or the bus or the shuttle and so on?
I think it will happen pretty soon, because right now, this week, they started broad tests in Barcelona, really driving through the city with the public being able freely to get in these vehicles. Also this week, the test in Valence, in France. So I think it's really just a matter of very curious mind to do something about it.
And the impact, in your opinion, too, what will be the impact on the development of this technology and transport?
Well, there are two possibilities. Either the vehicles that are deployed, like the WeRide, the Asian developers took really good care, and it will be very difficult to hack them in. And then, well, it's not such a big, even if something will get hacked, we can then, make a lot of publicity about it, and then we will fix the bug, and great. But if it was really, really bad done, maybe just an opportunity to take it seriously. I don't think they will be taken off the road. They will say, in any case, it's experimental technology. We have time to fix it. Okay, it's part of the experimentation in the first place, right?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. In the end, you mentioned a whole bunch of privacy issues and said that there are some possibilities with anonymization, and even though it's pseudonymization, do you think that this will actually be implemented? From my experiences with the operators, they always say, well, they want to protect against vandalism, and this will inevitably require de-anonymization. So I'm not sure. Do you think that this privacy issue is actually solvable?
Well, to give you a frank answer, the current positions of the manufacturers is that we don't care about privacy. So to make the transition from this aptitude towards the real actions that they will do something, it's not trivial. We can try, and this is what we are trying to do in our lab, through the regulation standardization, to propose different kind of frameworks that will encompass privacy-related aspects. When you have to do the TARA, for example, assessment, so that it impacts the type of approval, so that these vehicles in the first place cannot be authorized to be on the roads if they didn't take this privacy seriously. Whether it will happen or not, unfortunately, I cannot tell, but we believe in that it can happen. Because if we lose hope that we can make it happen, then what's the point of even trying, right? I think there was also another question there.
Hi, yes. So my question is not so much technical, but maybe you can answer it, since I think you work at GSM. Do you think, or do we know whether this public automated transportation will drive the price up or down?
If we're talking about Geneva, normally not, because, we vote every time for keeping the public transportation fees at the same level. However, the way the technology is today, like with the vehicles that were first used in the prototypes, we know this business model doesn't really scale, because especially before the ordinance came into the place, when the safety operator was required to be in the vehicle anyways, you kind of cannot scale it by, let's say, removing all the drivers and putting them into something else. It's hard to speculate on that.
And it's only 16 people and not 50 or whatever.
But for like remote areas, I think it's definitely scalable, because if you need to send today, like when there are some kind of on-demand traditional on-demand traditional service offering, they need to call somebody needs to go, take the bus, go there, pick the person, bring it back. If you think of the price of performing this kind of action, because legally they need to provide the service in all areas, automated vehicle, in that sense, solve this problem, because then it can more dynamically pick up the people who are somehow in the area, and there is no human intervention required in that sense.
Thank you.
You talked about that insurance is to be covered by the vehicle owner. What are the legal implications if you have level 4 driving and there is an accident? Who is responsible for legal fees and so on?
The vehicle owner. That's what the ordinance is saying. It's specifically for the level 4 vehicles, that is the vehicle owner. So let's say if this vehicle is acquired by the public transport operator, so it's this public transport operator who is responsible for, no matter what is happening, they need to make sure that there's an insurance, and they are responsible for that. Okay.
Yes, hello, thank you for this talk. There's one point at which I'm really trying to think is, all these problems we have because the vehicle is not self-contained and fully autonomous between offline and online operation. Most of the systems we're looking at is online operation. If you look at Tesla, they're saying they're sending everything to the supercomputer somewhere, and he's taking the decision if you go forward or you stop. how will this security be affected, or will it get better when the car is really autonomous and capable of taking its own decision and not depending on any outside interference which exceeds his sight of view, which is the case of a noble driver? What's your thoughts about it?
Well, we will always have a dependency, because fully autonomous vehicle, it implies that it is capable of learning information from other vehicles on the road. So it will never be self-contained per se. There will be always these communication channels going either to the infrastructure or to the other vehicle. So it will be the same in that sense. It will never be self-contained. Do we have any other questions? All right.
Thank you for this great talk.
Thank you.